Welcome to the new session on faculty guidance webinar, the present situation. Now we all know that we are passing through a state of pandemic, and there are many tricky issues associated with pandemic which we need to understand about the legal aspects as well as the management aspect. In the previous session, we discussed about the management and the specific issues specific to COVID-19. Today, Dr. Madhur Unyal is going to take us through the Epidemic Act, Disaster Act, and crisis management in healthcare during pandemics or during epidemics. So, I hand over the session to Dr. Madhur Unyal and to take it further. So,
Thank you, Dr. Puneet. Welcome all. So I'll be talking today about the Epidemic Act, the Disaster Management Act, and Crisis Management in Healthcare. So I have 30 minutes to go. So let's catch the bull by its horns. First, before going to the trade, let's see what the trade really is. These days, we're hearing a lot of terms: endemic, epidemic, pandemic. But what are they exactly? The definitions are given in n number of textbooks, but what do they boil down to? So we call a disease an endemic when it is always present in a particular region. For example, a place where it occurs time and again in that same very geographical area, it's called endemic. It might be because of typical characteristics of this place, like Japanese encephalitis in the eastern part of Uttar Pradesh. We know that's endemic there. Like cholera is endemic in some places where they do not have water treatment facility. Now, what an epidemic is, and what is the difference between epidemic and an outbreak? So, epidemic is that disease might be present in that geographical area, but there is a sudden and unexpected increase in number of cases. Then, what is an outbreak? Outbreak is just similar to epidemic, just on a lesser scale. So, how less is this? There is an equipoise in the literature which does not exactly objectify the difference between epidemic and outbreaks, but some people believe that epidemic is on a larger scale. But for all practical purposes, all the statisticians and public disease experts use these terms interchangeably. So what is a pandemic? So the simplest definition of the word pandemic was given by WHO in 2020 when it was dealing with H1N1 virus, and it simply stated that worldwide spread of a new disease is called pandemic. So right now, the crisis we are dealing in is a pandemic. What other pandemics were there? Now you can see some of the epidemics that happened in India. In 1994, there was a plague near the region of Gujarat and all. So there were 693 cases only and 56 deaths. It was limited to a geographical region, so it was called epidemic or a plague outbreak. And when we talk about pandemics, let's see what the pandemics the world has seen. We have seen Black Death, the plague of Justinian, smallpox, plague, Spanish flu, which we think is the precursor or which we compare the today's corona to. The third plague, HIV, AIDS, and COVID-19. We see in the gray part, we see the death still less there, 2.7 million deaths. And this is January, February, March. This is data of the March. But we should realize that it has done this in very short span of time. So now coming to the act itself. Epidemic Disease Act is not a new act. It's around 124 years old act, which was given at the time of British Raj. And recently it has been amended. It was introduced in 1896 by the British, and it was specifically introduced to tackle the Bombay bubonic plague, which was epidemic by that time. Here you can see a photograph where the inoculation was being taken place in 1896 in India. Smaller acts there ever is in Indian Constitution. It has only 4 sections. What does it actually do? Enables the state to ban social gatherings, and it penalizes media for spreading misinformation. Can I request somebody who has his mic on to please, somebody with a kit, so that they can mute it? Mr. Akhil, can you please mute your mic, please? So this act basically enables the government to ban social gatherings and penalize media for spreading misinformation. It's an 1897 act, and one of the first victims of this act was Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who wrote in his newspaper Kesari about mishandling of the plague situation by the British government, and he was arrested for it. So this act, like I said, is one of the smallest acts in the Indian Constitution. It has 4 sections. The first section just describes the short title and extent. It says this will be called Epidemic Disease Act 1897, and the extent will be all throughout India along with its union territories. This act, the second section of this act, deals with the power to take special measures and prescribe regulations as relevant to the epidemic. You might have heard that recently the second section of this act was evoked by the government. It allows the government to inspect person or ship. That time it was ship, but this time it is even the aircraft or the Airbuses coming to countries or going back from there. Without their permission, they can be inspected and detained, the people and the vehicle they're coming in. And it also levies penalty as per section 188 IPC. This section gives the power to a civil servant to penalize people in case, these are the special powers in cases of epidemic or pandemics, which back in the time had arrest up to 1 month and fine of rupees 200. In cases of grievous hurt, the jail sentence was up to 6 months, and the financial penalty was of 1,000 rupees. And the fourth part of the act was for the protection of the persons who are acting under the act, the government servants who are enacting this act or who are acting under the guidance of this act to protect themselves, to protect them from any legal hardship or otherwise. The section 4 dealt with that. So there recently has been an amendment, an ordinance was brought to make this act more significant in today's times. This ordinance came in effect from 22nd April 2020, recently in the Corona times. So what does it say? What does this ordinance empower this act to? It basically safeguards the interests of the healthcare workers. It says there is zero tolerance to any form of violence against healthcare service personnel and damage to the property. The violence is defined as harassment and physical injury and damage to property. The harassment is not only physical, but it is mental as well. Who are these health service personnel? Doctors, nurses, paramedical workers, and community health workers, and any other persons who are empowered under the Act to take measures to prevent the outbreak, which includes the security personnel as well. Here are the few news clippings from which you might be seeing in last few days. Take strict action against the landlords, asking the doctors to vacate homes, says Delhi government. So actually, we are all protected by this. So if a landlord asks you to evict his house because he thinks you might get corona or you might get disease into their apartment, they'll be booked under this act. This gentleman, I know all of you must be remembering and all of you must have a fire burning inside. This was a mental harassment. And again, this gentleman did not had to resign. Simply the person who had harassed him should have been booked under this Epidemic Disease Amendment Ordinance Act, and it was a non-bailable cognizant act. What does cognizable and non-bailable mean? Cognizable means there has to be no court intervention, or the court intervention is rather not required for police to act. So if police is given information that such and such thing has been happened, the harassment has been happened, or the violence against the person or the property has been there, it can, without the taking prior permission of the court, can go and take action. This act has now become non-bailable. Earlier it was bailable, but now the police cannot give bail to the person who has been booked under this act. Again, the graver the results are, the more deterrent effect the act has. So now the imprisonment term has been increased from 3 months to 5 years. And in grievous cases, or where you call grievous hurt, it will be a term from 6 months to 7 years. And again, the financial fine has also been increased. It's 50,000 to 2 lakhs. And in grievous cases, it's 1 lakh to 5 lakhs. In addition, if there has been a harm to the property, offenders shall also be liable to pay compensation, which is twice the fair market value of the damaged property. So if your property is weighed around, say, around somebody destroys a car and it has a market value of 5 lakh rupees. So the offender will have to pay 6 lakhs rupees for it. There's no doubt about it. And it has to be investigated by somebody who is not less than rank of an inspector. And within 30 days, he has to complete his inquiry and trial has to be completed in 1 year. So these are the important points of this act which safeguards the health personnel during these tough times of pandemics or epidemics. There's no need to be afraid. Together we will make a difference, because the fire which burns inside us medicos burns more than fire around us, I'm pretty sure. And there are laws there to protect us against it. We just need to know. Now coming to the Disaster Management Act 2005. Disaster Management Act is actually a very exhaustive act. It is a huge act which has brought a paradigm shift in the disaster management of our country. It has 11 chapters and 79 sections, and most of these chapters are the foundation of disaster management in our country. They deal with capacity building. They deal with formation of agencies like National Disaster Management Agency or State Disaster Management Agency and all those things. So it has a capacity building act as well, and it has some sections. So I'm just pointing out the relevant sections which the healthcare workers might take care, and I will share the PowerPoint presentation of in a PDF manner to the WhatsApp groups, various WhatsApp groups. So to talk about 11 chapters and 79 sections would be entirely different ball game. I'll just quote a few sections which are important to us in these days. Section 51, punishment for obstruction. So anybody who is obstructing you from doing your duty in the line of epidemic or pandemic care is punishable with an imprisonment which may extend to 1 year or a fine, and both of them. So nobody can stop you from doing what you are doing. If you're going to inspect a place, if you're going to inspect people, if you're going to check for in a community the prevalence of the disease, if anybody stops you, he is punishable with imprisonment of at least 1 year and along with a fine. Section 52, false claim, punishment for false claim. There are many people who will claim later on, okay, fine, because of this happened and now I shall claim a benefit, or I can claim a compensation. But if you are proven that you have falsely claimed this compensation, the state government or the central government can punish you with the imprisonment which may extend for 2 years along with a fine or not. Then misappropriation of money or materials. If any person who is working under this act misappropriates the money, if he misappropriates the funds which are allocated for people for disaster management, especially in this pandemic area, action can be taken against, and it is again up to 2 years of jail sentence, and financial implications are also there. Punishment for false warning. We should be careful what we post on Facebook these days, or Facebook and WhatsApp, both of them these days, because if our posts or if whatever we are saying, whether it's hearsay or otherwise, creates a panic in the society, that person can be convicted and can be imprisoned for 1 year along with fine or not. Then again comes the responsibility which most of us medicos already know about, the vicarious responsibility, the respondent superior, that the head of the department will have to bear the brunt of the entire department. Anybody of us, the department does not perform, there's any lack by the department, it is the head of the department who is to be blamed for. And then there is failure of officer in duty, anybody taking unjustifiable leaves. And I will not work in pandemic. I have some medical situation at home. And if it is proven that you don't have that situation, or I've had an exposure in reality when you have not, and it's been proven, then you can be imprisoned for at least 1 year and have financial implications as well. So running away from accountability is not tolerated in the Disaster Management Act. Then contravening of any order regarding requisition. if any person contravenes any order made section 65, he can be punishable with imprisonment for a term. So what does it mean? It means the government, if it wants to use your property or any of your private belongings for the cause of pandemic, you are liable to give it. For example, acquisition of hotels. So the hoteliers know if the government invokes the Disaster Management Act, and if you say if you don't support, government can even come to and say, hey, we need your car, we need to do this, we need your car for this, please give us your car. So they can refund you, or they can give the financial benefit to you, they can pay to you, but you cannot say no, because when the Disaster Management Act is there, and if you say no, then you might be imprisoned for 1 year and with a fine. So we have to be careful about it, and other people should also think that these are not normal times and should cooperate. And then there are offense by companies, disaster management rules, selling remdesivir for 25,000 rupees, hoarding of medication. All of these are offense by the disaster management rules and are liable for infirmary, liable for jail sentence of at least 2 years. And then the previous sanction for prosecution. It is for the protection of the healthcare workers or the people who are working for the government during pandemic. If there has to be any lawsuit against them, that person has to get permission prior from the government to initiate a lawsuit. So all the government officials who are working, or the people who are hired on the behalf of the government working for pandemic or working for some disaster situation which invokes the disaster management law, will be saved from prosecution, because they'll have to take prior permission for the government to prosecute you. Then these laws are meant to protect us, but it is us only who are selling saline instead of remdesivir, who are hoarding tocilizumab, who are selling a pulse oximeter for 5,000 rupees. So if the liberty is given to the wolves amongst us, it is the death of rest of the lambs. Now, just buying my time for last topic, that is the crisis management principles. So crisis management principle, this topic is too less to be spoken in this amount of time. Disaster management, crisis management are one of my favorite topics, and I think I have tried my best to learn about them. But here I shall be discussing only a few things. I'll tell you brief in 5 minutes about the AIIMS Rishikesh story. Any crisis management principle has preventive aspect, a residual risk aspect, a preparatory aspect, a response, and recovery. This is the cycle which follows either after a disaster or a crisis. It is an inevitable cycle. It follows. How better we do it is up to the institution. So when we talked about prevention, I'll just briefly, I'm just touching upon the topics. These can be explained very beautifully. We had a wonderful team, a wonderful amount of work, and it has been a learning experience for me, a huge learning experience. For preventive aspect, what did we do in AIIMS Rishikesh? When we heard that COVID was on the door of the country, there was not even one single case here in Uttarakhand. That time we came to know that elderly people are getting really affected. That was the first wave when they said that elderly and infants, they're being affected too much. That was said when the COVID was on our doors. So our institute, under the able guidance of our director, told our senior professors who are greater than 65 years of age that please rest at your place. I beg your pardon, they didn't say rest. They say start working from home. And they created the CPD group, Continuous Professional Development Group. This group was already there, but this research core was initiated by our senior professors. They had friends all over the world. They communicated to their friends that what trend was going on. India was behind on the COVID threshold that time. So they got all the information, and they were the one who were responsible for planning and strategizing our fight against COVID. They told us that OPD should be outside. 99% of infection to healthcare workers that had occurred in the West were indoors. Less than 1% had occurred outdoors. So we got DRDO tents and we started our OPD outside. We have started our screening clinics outside, and till date, we do that. we made a 3-tiered roster. One was on call, second was alternate, and third was on off. This so that if one of the shift got infected, the entire shift got infected because of an exposure, or it had to be quarantined, we still had 2 teams working alternatively, and that gave us a chance for system not to collapse. Preparations for preventing the fomite infection, we made all of our hospital paperless. So all of our COVID-related documentation is paperless. So that the files and all those things do not carry germs. While people were using handheld cameras, we used thermal cameras, which would scan the whole crowds at the doors and at the entrances and exits, so that meticulous journey was not there. And even today, if I take a warm tiffin in my hand and I pass through those cameras, it gives a beep and sounds an alarm. Then we realized that this time, where everybody is fearing to go outside, our healthcare workers had fear to go into their homes because they might not infect their family. And which was true, because these would be carriers. So we tried to get accommodation for them. We talked to the government. We are pretty insistent to the extent of being insolvent, that please give us accommodation, give us our people accommodation outside so that they can work in peace. Of course, we took care of masks, sanitization, and all these logistics were procured in time. Residual risk. Whenever we talk of residual risk, these are the black swan crisis. We call it black swan because nobody anticipates them. We make plans, but these things, there's no way to judge that this will happen. Like we could have thought of wards, we could have thought of better infrastructure, but we never would thought, I don't think so anybody in India thought, that we would need testing at such a large scale. We had a virology lab which was functional with modern equipments, but the scale of testing required was a black swan to us. We had no clue what to do, but in a very short period of time, we managed our resources and got these things. So there should be a contingency fund. The experts who deal with crisis say that for residual risk, there should always be a contingency fund. There should be funds, you can depend upon to tackle these events of black swan crisis. We could do that by the help of Honorable Director, and we tied over, I think, in a very good way. Preparations. There's a very common saying in whenever we talk about disaster or crisis management, that when the disaster strikes, the time of preparation has gone. You cannot wake up and say, ki, kal hum log curfew laga denge. Tomorrow, let's do this. Let's open these clinics tomorrow. Let's become a COVID resilient country tomorrow. It does not happen like that. There has to be a lot of preparation behind it. Capacity building should be there. So when we realized that India was going to be hit by COVID, emergency meeting was called under the leadership of our dynamic director, and we started capacity building programs. We knew that ventilators, though even if they're enough, there are very less people to man the ventilators. We have only one pulmonary care department and one critical care department, which is anesthesiology as well. So only these few people, and these people work together most of the times. So if they're down, how will the center work? So we sat down, and the experts from our institute made very short courses of managing a ventilator. So anybody who was an MBBS, a dermatologist, had to do this course. Anybody who was post MBBS and employed in our hospital had to do this course, so that if, God forbid, they were needed, they would know at least the basic management of patient. They would not let at least patient with a respiratory failure die on their watch. Logistic was a huge reason. We'd never heard of PPE. We've heard of hazmat suits, but PPE, what was that? We never heard of it. So then all these things were hired, and all of the people, I know that most of you are leaders, and all of you realize that what problems we had to face initially. Everybody was blackmailing us, right from China to the vendors who were doing that. They were doing it. But then logistics had to be procured. We did a preparation much before the COVID hit us. Infrastructure. Our trauma center is a separate standalone building connected to the main building with the help of a skywalk. So it was a natural choice for a communicable disease like this. It was immediately taken for COVID, and every bed was equipped with centralized oxygen supply. And then it came handy later on. And today also, when the second wave hit, it was the first to offer its services, and it was the first to be efficiently used. Last but not the least, preparation of all these things can be done in a few months. But to create that team, that dependable team, there is a lot of things which has been said about team. But I think with my personal experience, which is not much, but at least 3 years of experience in AIIMS Rishikesh, I can say that has benefited me the most. Apart from any other infrastructure, you create a team, you understand the positives and negatives of your juniors. And to tell you frankly, in our case, it was the staff nursing officers, very intelligent cadre, which we doctors usually undermine. And using them was and still is one of the best foot of AIIMS Rishikesh Trauma Center. Those people, and today even we have to give a task, I just say, give me my team, and we will do that task, however challenging it is. And that has been an effort of last 3 years. Regular drilling in the mornings, even if there was no patient coming of trauma, we would drill. So there was a team leader, there was a person assisting him, and there was a mechanism to sort of hierarchy develop, giving benefits to the juniors, irrespective of the seniority. That gives them the confidence that, okay, fine, we are also being recognized. Knowing their names, knowing their this creates an environment which helps you in the time of crisis. Might sound like a moral science class, but let me tell you, if one thing I have to choose of all these 4 things, I'll choose is machinery. And then when the time is there, we should respond. How to respond, I should not say much, because there were hospitals who were not trying to take patients. There were hospitals who were shunning patients at that time. Patient nahi hai, let's wait. Ek patient kahin aur bhej do. Ek patient aage hamara kya hoga? Eventually, they had to take patient, and they lost wonderful times of training, which they could have done with one patient. They could have created a system with one patient, but they waited. कि नहीं अभी और आने दो, अभी और बड़ा होने दो, अभी तो नहीं करेंगे. जब बाद में होगा तो देखेंगे. बचने से रह के, they were very last lagging. Eventually, you have to, but the most effective way to do is to start doing it. And then the recovery phase. And no recovery phase is complete without introspection. What you did, if you don't sit down and discuss and what went wrong and how we can better it, not in a way that somebody should be penalized because of it, but in a way that we improve together. Something which does not have consequences for the workers who are involved. And then formulating strategy again is the best way we can recover. That's my time. Thank you, everybody. And your questions are welcome in the text section, and I'll definitely answer you all. And if there is any question, and if there's time left, if the moderator allows me to any time left, I would be glad to answer.
Thank you, Madhur. Thank you for taking us through these acts. We still have a couple of minutes left for any questions and that people may have. I have one question, Madhur, from my side. Like there has been a lot of issues and complaints regarding the violence against doctors in this last couple of months. So are we safe for that, or should we prepare more at AIIMS Rishikesh? Is there any more preparation that needs to be done for this?
So the thing is, the best way is to make precedents. If you talk of any act, see, there has been an ordinance brought for this, especially in 2020, but that is just a year ago. And how have we enacted it? We haven't. If you realize, you remember this person. If you see the screen, Dr. Yogen Srivastava, he resigned. He thought he was a helpless chap. Anybody who comes and questions somebody's diligence. This is harassment, and this should have been booked. So all the healthcare workers should have come together, and they should have said, no, this is not done. We are good on Facebooks, we are good on WhatsApps, we are good on social activism, but there are laws for this. There are already laws for this. Precedence is already there. What did we do when we were being evacuated from by the landlords? Our staff nurses were not allowed in. I remember small girls in their early 20s, staff nurses. The landlords shut the door at them. We did not make a precedence. So it is up to us that we make precedents. We don't let these small incidences go unpunished. Because if we do that, there are good enough laws, good enough immunity. There can be better laws than this. But we have to start enacting them. We have to stop our WhatsApp activism, and we should start Together, we should say this has been done, this has to be stopped. There's an ordinance, let's get it done. And you don't need a court's permission to do it. It's a cognizable offense. Anybody can come and you can report, and they have to arrest, and it's a non-bailable offense. There are wonderful laws for it, sir. We don't know about them.
Maybe if anything, in God forbid, anything of that sort takes place at our institution, I think we can always approach our legal cell for such remedies.
Even for the smallest of harassment, sir. Because this thing right now, the doctors, the healthcare workers are the softest targets. We have to say no to 98% of people because our infrastructure supports only 2% of these. We have no choice. But those 98%, they think that we have to be blamed for it. And the incidence of violence will increase as the desperation increases. You know that we haven't reached the peak. We might reach peak in the next 3 weeks. So things are not going to get better. So, like you said, sir, for every small incidence of this, it should not go unpunished because it will set an incidence and there will be a message that these people are here to help. These people are not to be harassed. These people are not punching bags.
Yeah, thank you, Madhu. Any other from audience? We still have 1 minute left for the session. Okay, there are no questions. So thanks a lot, Madhu. Thanks for giving us this information. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.